Hello, everyone. Welcome to Writing Quest. My name is Brendan Pugh, and in today's episode, we are talking about Book 2 of The Wheel of Time, The Great Hunt. Huzzah! Alright, so as you know, I've started reading The Wheel of Time, and last month I finished The Great Hunt, which is Book 2. I will say, as you know from my previous review of Eye of the World, that it was kind of hard for me to get into it first. As you know, once I started getting into it, I really was into it. Once I started reading this book, though, I was locked in. I loved it. I thought it was really great. It finally got me into this series, I would say, because, The Eye of the World has a lot going on. It's really slow in the beginning. It's hard to, there's so much stuff going on. And it took me a couple of times to actually finally finish it because it was just really hard for me to get into. It was hard for me to finally pick it up. But once I start, the first chapter of this opens with Rand doing some sword training with Lan. And I loved it from the moment I started. So, we are going to do some pros and some cons. We're going to start with the cons first so we can end on a good note. Here we go. Wheel of Time, The Great Hunt. Okay, so we're going to start with the cons. So the first con is it was still a little slow at parts. Now, I believe this is just kind of part of how Robert Jordan writes. I've read that and talked to a lot of people. They talk about that a lot, where he just has those moments where it's a little slower. It's very wordy. It's a lot of words, very Tolkien-like, where it's just, you feel like there's so many extra words that just don't need to be said. But at the same time, I'm learning to respect them, at least, if I don't even if I don't enjoy them, because you definitely kind of get that sense that he is so passionate about the world he created, and he just wanted to take his time. Honestly, while it's a con for reading it, and it's kind of hard to read, from a writing and author perspective, I am appreciating the fact that he took so much time to create so much detail. So, if I look at it through the writer lens, I see it as a pro, but as a reader lens, it's a con because it's sometimes just there's some parts of the book where you're kind of a slog and it doesn't really hold you into it. What I do think, though, is upon a reread, which will probably happen once I get through all of them, I'll go back and reread. As I said with Eye of the World, on a reread, that's going to be some of the stuff that's more interesting as you continue to dive into the world and try to figure everything out. Con number 2 is that sometimes I struggle to understand what's going on in the big moments. He gets into the big battle scenes and some of those climactic moments, and the writing style is very, I just get a little lost. All of a sudden, so when I start, I'm currently reading The Dragon Reborn, which is book number 3. And so when they start to discuss some of the things that happened in the climax of book 2, when I was reading it just from the style, when I got to book 3, it explained some of book 2, because in book 2, I was kind of wait, what's happening here? I had to reread a couple of pages just to get myself oriented. So it was a little disorienting sometimes when the way that they describe the events of the end of book 2 in book 3 were different than how I saw them when I read them. So that could just be a me thing, or it could just be the writing does get a little muddled. Hard to say. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Con number 3 is that we didn't have as much time with Matt and Perrin. We spent a lot of time with Rand, and we spent a lot of time with Loyal, which was really cool. And it was definitely a book that was specifically about Rand's adventure. In book 1, you kind of had the Fellowship of the Ring. We're all going together. You don't really know who's supposed to be who. And so you kind of get equal distribution with all the characters. And with this one, it's definitely mostly with Rand. And so I felt a little bit like we didn't really get anything for Matt and Perrin's story, which was fine. Understand it. It's a long series. One of the things I've heard, my older brother who loves this series has told me that he's some books, some characters just aren't even in. And that's kind of the pro and the con, and the curse and the blessing of a long series is, you can just abandon a character for a whole book and then you have plenty of time to come back to him. But Personally, I would have loved to see a little bit more of Matt and Perrin and their stories. However, getting into book 3, we're starting to get more of that. So I guess the whole problem isn't really that big of a problem at all. And number 4, the Shai-Chan suck. They are the worst. Now, in a storytelling world, like, that's great for being a, it's kind of a pro. It's kind of like the Joker, like, you love to hate him. But yeah, they were terrible. They're a terrible enemy. And all the things that happen around them are just like, I strongly felt myself disliking them, which of course is the point. So I kind of put it in the con category, but it's not really a pro or a con. Basically, the way he wrote those characters in that group of people definitely invoked the feeling that I was supposed to have, and they're the worst. All right, we're going on to the pros of this book, and I'm really excited about this. Like I said, I really love this one, so I didn't really have as many cons, and a lot of my cons are kind of pros anyways. So the pros for this are, number 1, Nynaeve is way better. In the first book, I found myself being super duper annoyed by her and everything that she does. And in this book, she still has some tendencies that bug me and kind of annoy me, like some of the choices and things she says. But I did find myself really finding this being a lot more like, oh, she's really cool and she's going to become really cool. I could see glimpses of that, and she didn't bug me as much in this one. Number 2 was the introduction of a bunch of different magical elements. I won't give it all too much away, but they had a lot more. In the first book, they mostly just talk about Aes Sedai, and there's some dream stuff. All the boys are having dreams of the Dark One and all that. But in this one, they really started to explore a lot more themes of magic. And I'm really starting to see that, there's multiple magic systems in this and how they all intertwine. And it was really cool. Some of it was very one of the things I'm really learning to appreciate about Robert Jordan's world is that it is so ancient. He talks about all this history and all this stuff and how everything, kind of gets together and how it works is really cool. So I was really fascinated to see some more of the magic stuff. And even now in Dragon Reborn, we're getting into a little bit more of that, but we'll save that for that review. Number 3 pro is there's a lot more of subplots that kind of got seeded throughout this book. And you can really, I found myself, now that I'm getting more used to Robert Jordan's writing, I found myself as I'm reading, I'm like, oh, that'll be cool if he comes back to that. And oh, that'll be cool if he comes back to that. It was a really cool way to, I just found myself noticing those more. And so it'll be really cool to watch them pay off. But then again, on a reread, be able to notice maybe even more of them. And I'm just starting to really see the tapestry that he's woven around this whole thing. You might say the wheel that he's woven around this whole thing. Number 4, this one is a spoiler. So spoiler warning, cut it off. Stop if you don't want a spoiler. But this is a spoiler. Here we go. Tom is back, and I love seeing him. Obviously, I knew that he was probably not dead. If you are a longtime watcher, reader of anything sci-fi, fantasy, Marvel Comics, anything, we know that people don't die, really. And so when Tom disappeared in the first book, you never saw a body, you never saw what happened. So obviously, it's a really, I knew that he would be coming back anyways. But it was great to see him back. I thought how they brought him back was really cool, where he just kind of shows up in the inn and he's just doing his thing. I think that's one of the things that sometimes with fantasy and stuff, you get into the trope of everyone is always so concerned about the main story. And what was really cool with Tom is he fought the Fade in the first book. They ended. He got separated from the 2 guys. And then he just went back to his normal life. He's well, I'll just go back to what I was doing, being a gleeman and running around telling stories and singing and stuff. And so I thought that was a really, that's a normal way that he would have handled it, most likely. He just was well, this isn't really my story. I'm just going to go back to doing my life. And then now he's getting sucked back into it. So that was a really cool part of the story. I really appreciated that. And finally, the final battle of this book is epic. Super great. I won't give it all away. I won't do any more spoilers for this, but that was, whoa. I found myself there's parts of the books where I would read 4, 5, 6 chapters in a day, and then I'd skip it for a couple days. And then once I got to the the last third, fourth of the book where you start getting into the climax, I just read it. I was so into it. I was like, holy cow, this is a page turner. And so the final battle is great, how everything happens, and just, part of the con was that I kind of got confused. I had to reread some parts because there's so much going on. But the actual events that happened are super cool. And it's such a, again, it goes back even to the magic thing where it's like there's so many magical elements happening. And I loved it. It was super cool. Big fan. Well, anyways, that is my review for Robert Jordan's Wheel of Time, The Great Hunt, which is book 2 of the Wheel of Time series. I'm super into it. I'm super excited. I'm about halfway through The Dragon Reborn. And so when that one comes back up, when I finish that one, I'll get that review for that one and head on into book 4. So I'm really hoping I can finish all these books before the first half of the year, but we will see. I am kind of a slow reader, but I do love what I read. So thank you for watching this episode talking about the Wheel of Time. Hope you liked it. Like, comment, share, subscribe. If you want to talk about things below, let's do that. And we'll see you next time on Writing Quest. Huzzah!